Sarah Mitchell's hands trembled as the jet dealership security guard escorted her toward the exit, the sales manager's cruel laughter echoing behind her. Jets are for real businessmen, not little girls playing dress-up. What they didn't know was that her husband owned the world's largest private medical jet fleet, and by tomorrow morning, 27 of his aircraft would be landing right outside their doors. Sarah Mitchell walked through the glass doors of Sterling Aviation, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. She had driven 2 hours to reach this dealership, clutching a folder of research about medical transport jets. Her simple jeans and faded college sweatshirt made her stand out like a weed in a garden of expensive suits. The showroom sparkled with million-dollar aircraft. Sleek jets lined the floor like gleaming metal sculptures. Sarah had never seen anything so beautiful or intimidating. She approached the nearest aircraft, a white jet with silver trim, and pulled out her notebook. "Excuse me, miss." A sharp voice cut through her concentration. Marcus Sterling strutted toward her, his Italian leather shoes clicking with each step. His perfectly styled hair and gold watch screamed money and arrogance. "Are you lost? The coffee shop is across the street." Sarah looked up from her notes. "Actually, I'm here to buy a jet for my husband's medical practice. He runs emergency transport missions." Marcus burst into laughter that echoed off the high ceiling. Other customers turned to stare. "A jet? Sweetheart, do you have any idea what these cost?" "I've done my research," Sarah replied calmly, opening her folder. "I'm looking for something that can carry medical equipment and reach remote areas quickly." "Listen, honey." Marcus stepped closer, towering over her. "These aren't toys from Hobby Shop. We're talking about serious money here. More money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes." Jennifer Walsh, his assistant, giggled behind her designer purse. She whispered something to another salesman, who smirked and shook his head. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. "Could you show me the specifications for that Cessna Citation?" The Citation? Marcus glanced at the aircraft worth $3 million. "That's not for people like you. Maybe try the used car lot downtown. They might have a nice minivan." A small crowd had gathered now. Wealthy customers in expensive clothes watched the scene unfold like entertainment. Some pulled out their phones, recording Sarah's humiliation. "I'm serious about making a purchase," Sarah insisted, clutching her folder tighter. "My husband saves lives. We need reliable aircraft for emergency missions." Marcus rolled his eyes dramatically. "Your husband? What does he do?" "Drive an ambulance." "Look around you, little girl. This is where real businessmen buy real aircraft, not where housewives come to daydream." Sarah's hands began to shake slightly, but she refused to back down. "My money is just as good as anyone else's." "Your money?" Marcus laughed again, louder this time. "What did you do? Save your babysitting earnings. These jets cost more than most people's houses." Jennifer stepped forward with a cruel smile. Maybe she's confused. The toy store is at the mall. The crowd chuckled. Sarah felt dozens of eyes judging her, dismissing her, treating her like a child who had wandered into the wrong place. "I think you should leave," Marcus said firmly, "before you embarrass yourself further. This is a serious business for serious people." Sarah closed her folder slowly. Her face burned with shame, but she lifted her chin with quiet dignity. "I understand perfectly now." She walked toward the exit, each step feeling like a mile. Behind her, she heard Marcus's voice carrying across the showroom. "Some people just don't know their place in the world." Sarah pushed through the glass doors into the parking lot, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed her husband's number. What Marcus Sterling didn't know was that Dr. James Mitchell had been sitting in his car the entire time, watching every moment of his wife's humiliation through those same glass windows. Dr. James Mitchell gripped his steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. From his black sedan, he had witnessed every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment of his wife's public humiliation. His jaw clenched as he watched Sarah exit the building, her shoulders slightly slumped but her head still held high. His phone buzzed. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "James." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the hurt underneath. "I'm done here. They wouldn't even let me look at the brochures." The man said jets are for real businessmen, not housewives with babysitting money. James closed his eyes, rage building in his chest like a storm. "Come home, sweetheart. We'll talk tonight." That evening, Sarah sat curled up on their living room couch, still wearing the same clothes from her disastrous dealership visit. Their mansion felt too big, too quiet. She stared out the window at their perfectly manicured gardens. Maybe they were right, she whispered when James sat beside her. Maybe I don't belong in that world. Maybe I was foolish to think I could just walk in and buy a jet. James took her hands gently. Sarah, you've raised $42 million for children's hospitals. You've negotiated with world leaders. You've saved thousands of lives through your charity work. You belong anywhere you choose to be. But they saw right through me, Sarah said, her voice small. They knew I didn't fit. They saw what they wanted to see. James replied, his voice growing harder. They saw a woman in casual clothes and decided she couldn't possibly have money or power. They were wrong on both counts. Sarah looked at her husband's face. Something cold and determined flickered in his eyes. James, what are you thinking? He stood up and walked to his office, returning with his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up files that made Sarah's eyes widen. Tomorrow morning, James said quietly, Marcus Sterling is going to learn something about making assumptions. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Mitchell Holdings, this is James. I need you to prepare the entire Atlantic medical fleet for deployment. All 27 aircraft. Sarah stared at him in confusion. James, what are you planning? Education. He replied, his smile cold as winter. Sterling Aviation is about to discover exactly who they dismissed today. He made another call. Captain Rodriguez, I need the fleet relocated to Sterling Regional Airport by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Yes, the entire fleet. Make sure every pilot wears full dress uniform. Sarah's heart began to race. James, you're scaring me a little. Don't be scared, James said, closing his laptop with a soft click. Be excited. Tomorrow, that arrogant fool learns what happens when you humiliate Dr. James Mitchell's wife. He pulled up news articles on his phone, showing Sarah headlines from around the world. Mitchell Medical Enterprises saves hurricane victims. Billionaire doctor's fleet delivers supplies to war zone. Medical aviation, giant expands global operations. Marcus Sterling had no idea, James continued, that he was talking to the wife of the man who owns the largest private medical jet fleet in the world. Sarah's mouth fell open as the full scope of James's plan became clear. By tomorrow morning, James said, standing and kissing her forehead, 27 jets will be parked outside Sterling Aviation. And I'm going to walk through those same glass doors and introduce myself properly. 27 medical jets descended from the sky like a fleet of silver angels, their engines roaring in perfect formation over Sterling Aviation. Marcus Sterling dropped his coffee mug, watching in horror as aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars filled every available space of the nearby airfield. What in the world? Marcus whispered, pressing his face against his office window. Each jet bore the distinctive Red Cross symbol of Mitchell Medical Enterprises, the company he'd read about in aviation magazines, but never dreamed of meeting. Jennifer burst through his door without knocking. Sir, there's a situation downstairs. Someone important is here to see you. Marcus straightened his tie and walked to the showroom floor, expecting to meet whoever owned this incredible fleet. His heart hammered against his ribs. This could be the sale of a lifetime. Dr. James Mitchell stepped through the glass doors with the quiet confidence of a man who owned the world. His custom suit fit perfectly, his silver hair was styled impeccably, and his eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone used to making life-or-death decisions. Mr. Sterling. James's voice carried across the suddenly silent showroom. I'm Dr. James Mitchell, founder and CEO of Mitchell Medical Enterprises. Marcus's face went pale as recognition hit him like a sledgehammer. Mitchell Medical was legendary in aviation circles. Their humanitarian missions made international headlines. Their fleet was worth over $2 billion. Dr. Mitchell, Marcus stammered, rushing forward with his hand extended. What an incredible honor. Welcome to Sterling Aviation. James ignored the offered handshake, his cold stare making Marcus's hand drop awkwardly to his side. I believe you met my wife yesterday. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face as puzzle pieces clicked into place. The woman in jeans. The simple clothes. The research folder. Your wife. Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. Sarah Mitchell, James continued, his voice growing dangerously quiet. She came here yesterday looking to purchase a medical transport jet. Perhaps you remember her. The entire showroom had fallen silent. Customers, salespeople, even the receptionist stopped what they were doing to listen. Marcus felt dozens of eyes watching his world crumble. Sir, I think there might be some confusion. Marcus began desperately. No confusion. James stepped closer. You told my wife that jets are for real businessmen, not little girls playing dress up. You suggested she try a used car lot. Jennifer backed away slowly, her face white with terror. She had laughed at Sarah Mitchell, the wife of a billionaire, the woman who ran international medical charities. Dr. Mitchell, please let me explain. Marcus begged, sweat beading on his forehead. Explain what exactly? James's voice remained calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. Explain how you judge customers by their clothes? Explain how you assume women can't make major purchases. David Chun, the young salesman who had tried to help Sarah, stepped forward nervously. Sir, I attempted to assist Mrs. Mitchell, but Mr. Sterling sent me away. James turned his attention to David, his expression softening slightly. What's your name, son? David Chun, sir. I've only been here 6 months. How would you have handled my wife's visit, David? David glanced nervously at Marcus before answering honestly. I would have listened to her needs, shown her relevant aircraft options, and treated her with the respect every customer deserves. James nodded approvingly. That's the difference between a professional and a fool. Marcus felt his career dissolving before his eyes. Dr. Mitchell, if you could just give me a chance to make this right. Make it right. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. You humiliated the woman who has saved more lives than this entire dealership combined. Through the windows, the 27 jets gleamed in the sunlight like a reminder of exactly how much money Marcus had just lost. Each aircraft represented millions of dollars in potential business. But James wasn't finished delivering his message, and the worst revelation was still coming. Richard Sterling burst from his private office like a man fleeing a fire, his face flushed red with panic. As the owner of Sterling Aviation, he had spent years trying to land a contract with Mitchell Medical Enterprises. Now that opportunity was exploding in front of his eyes. James, Richard gasped, using the first name like they were old friends. I had no idea you were visiting us today. Hello, Richard, James replied icily. Your son just destroyed what could have been the largest contract in your company's history. Richard's eyes darted between his son and the billionaire whose business he desperately wanted for years. What exactly happened here? Your sales director insulted my wife yesterday, treating her like a foolish child because she wore jeans instead of designer clothes. Richard spun toward Marcus with murder in his eyes. You did what? Dad, I didn't know who she was. Marcus pleaded, sweat dripping down his face. You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask. James interrupted sharply. You made assumptions based on her appearance and gender. The showroom door chimed softly as Sarah entered, having arrived to support her husband. Every head turned toward the simply dressed woman they had all dismissed 24 hours earlier. Her quiet dignity made the expensive surroundings seem suddenly cheap. Marcus stared at Sarah in absolute horror, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. This wasn't just any angry customer. This was the wife of one of the most powerful men in aviation. Mrs. Mitchell, Richard approached Sarah with genuine fear in his voice. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for what happened here. Sarah looked around the room at the same faces that had watched her humiliation yesterday. The customers who had laughed. The staff who had snickered. The man who had called her a little girl playing dress-up. Mr. Sterling, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying more authority than Marcus had ever possessed. Apologies are easy. Actions are what matter. James placed a protective arm around his wife's shoulders. We came here yesterday as potential customers. Sarah wanted to surprise me with a gift for our medical missions. Instead, she was treated like garbage. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as a whisper. Mrs. Mitchell, I am so truly sorry. If I had known who you were. Exactly, Sarah interrupted, her eyes flashing with controlled anger. If you had known who I was. But you should treat every customer with respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like. Jennifer had retreated to the far corner of the showroom, trying to make herself invisible. She remembered laughing at Sarah's simple clothes, making jokes about babysitting money. Now those jokes felt like daggers in her chest. The fleet outside. James gestured toward the windows where the 27 jets dominated the skyline. Represents our current medical operation. We save lives in disaster zones, transport critical patients, deliver supplies to remote hospitals. Richard's eyes widened as he calculated the value. 27 aircraft, worth approximately $2.8 billion, James confirmed. All purchased from your competitor, Apex Aviation, because they understood something you apparently don't. What's that? Richard asked desperately. That respect isn't determined by dress code, Sarah answered. That women can make business decisions just as well as men. That judging people by their appearance says more about you than it does about them. Marcus sank into a nearby chair, the full weight of his prejudice crushing down on him. He had lost the sale of a lifetime because he couldn't see past a pair of jeans. But James had one more surprise that would reshape everything at Sterling Aviation forever. James Mitchell pulled out his phone and showed Richard Sterling a contract worth $50 million. But the billionaire's next words would shock everyone in the room. We're prepared to give Sterling Aviation one final chance to prove they've learned something from this experience. Richard's hands trembled as he stared at the document. A chance? Dr. Mitchell, we don't deserve your business after what happened. You're right, Sarah spoke up, her voice steady but firm. But there's someone here who does deserve recognition. She turned toward David Chun, the young salesman who had tried to help her yesterday. David treated me with respect when no one else would. He saw a potential customer, not someone to dismiss. David's eyes widened in surprise. He had expected to be fired after witnessing the disaster with the Mitchell family. Which is why, James continued, David will be handling our account exclusively. If Sterling Aviation wants our business, it goes through him. Marcus felt his world collapse completely. The biggest sale in company history was slipping through his fingers. Go to the newest employee instead. Furthermore, Sarah added, we want to see real changes in how this dealership operates. Not just apologies, but action. Richard nodded desperately. Anything. What do you need? James handed him a business card. Dr. Patricia Williams runs diversity and inclusion training for Fortune 500 companies. Every employee here will complete her program. Of course, Richard agreed immediately. And Marcus, Sarah looked directly at the man who had humiliated her. You'll be volunteering at our children's medical charity for the next 6 months. Marcus looked up in shock. Volunteering? You need to understand who you were really talking to yesterday, Sarah explained. I don't just write checks for medical charities. I work directly with sick children, their families, people who have nothing but still treat others with kindness. Jennifer stepped forward nervously. Mrs. Mitchell, what about me? I laugh at you too. Sarah studied the young woman who had mocked her clothes and dreams. You'll join Marcus in a volunteer program. Maybe working with children who are fighting for their lives will teach you both about real strength. James opened his briefcase and pulled out purchase orders that made Richard's eyes bulge. These represent our East Coast expansion. 15 new medical jets, plus maintenance contracts for our existing fleet. 15, Richard whispered. Worth approximately $180 million over 3 years, James confirmed. But the contracts come with conditions. Name them, Richard said immediately. First, David Chun gets promoted to senior sales manager with full commission on our account. David looked like he might faint. A promotion after 6 months, handling the biggest client in company history. Second, every salesperson here completes sensitivity training within 30 days. Done, Richard agreed. Third, Sarah added, you establish a scholarship fund for young women interested in aviation careers. Too many girls are told they don't belong in this industry. Marcus watched his former position and commission disappear, going to someone who had shown basic human decency. The irony cut deep. And finally, James said, Sterling Aviation will sponsor our annual medical mission to Honduras. Your company name will be on our humanitarian flights, showing the world that you support women in aviation. Richard was already nodding before James finished speaking. Yes, absolutely. All of it. Sarah looked around the showroom one more time, at the faces that had judged her, at the luxury jets that represented dreams and aspirations. You know what I learned yesterday? She asked the gathered crowd. I learned that some people see a woman in simple clothes and assume she's powerless. They were wrong. But the biggest surprise was still coming. and it would transform Sterling Aviation forever. 6 months later, Marcus Sterling walked through the children's cancer ward at Boston Medical Center, his volunteer badge hanging around his neck like a badge of honor he'd finally earned. The arrogant salesman who had once dismissed Sarah Mitchell was gone, replaced by someone who understood the true meaning of strength. Mr. Marcus called 8-year-old Emma, a patient he'd been reading to for weeks. "Did you bring the airplane book?" "Of course I did." Marcus smiled, sitting beside her hospital bed. Emma was fighting leukemia, but dreamed of becoming a pilot someday. Her courage made Marcus ashamed of who he used to be. Across the hospital, Sarah Mitchell finished her rounds as head of the Children's Advocacy Program. She had personally funded the new pediatric wing and visited patients every week. Her simple clothes hadn't changed, but the respect she commanded was absolute. "Mrs. Sarah," Emma called out as Sarah approached. "Mr. Marcus was telling me about the lady pilot who flies the medical helicopters." "Was he now?" Sarah glanced at Marcus with surprise. 6 months of volunteering had transformed him completely. "Emma wants to be a pilot," Marcus explained. "I've been telling her about all the amazing women in aviation." Sarah sat on the other side of Emma's bed. "You know, Emma, I happen to know someone who owns a lot of airplanes. Maybe someday you could see them up close." Emma's eyes went wide. "Really?" Back at Sterling Aviation, the transformation was equally dramatic. David Chun stood in his new office, reviewing contracts that had made him the youngest senior sales manager in company history. The scholarship fund for young women in aviation had already helped 12 students start their careers. Jennifer Walsh approached his desk nervously. Her time volunteering at the hospital had humbled her completely. "David, the Mitchell Medical contract renewal is ready for your review. How's your volunteer work going?" David asked. "It's educational," Jennifer admitted. "Those kids face real problems every day, but they're still kind to everyone. It makes you realize how petty workplace prejudices really are." Through the showroom windows, David could see the latest delivery from Mitchell Medical Enterprises. 3 brand new jets, worth $60 million, all sold because one person had shown basic respect to a customer in casual clothes. Richard Sterling gathered his staff for the monthly meeting. "Sales are up 300% this year," he announced. "We've landed contracts with 4 major medical organizations, all because word spread about our new approach to customer service." "What new approach?" asked the newer salesman. "We treat everyone with respect," Richard explained. "We listen to what they need instead of judging what they look like." Revolutionary concept, apparently. At the hospital, Sarah found Marcus reading to a group of young patients. His voice was gentle, patient, completely different from the arrogant man who had dismissed her months earlier. "You know," Sarah said after the children returned to their rooms, "James and I have been discussing expanding our scholarship program." Marcus looked up hopefully. "I'd like to help with that, if you'll let me." "Why?" Sarah asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because Emma asked me yesterday why some people think girls can't be pilots. I realized I used to be one of those people. I want to be part of the solution instead of the problem." Sarah nodded approvingly. "There's a board meeting next month. We could use someone who understands both aviation sales and the importance of inclusion." As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on how much had shifted since that humiliating day at the dealership. Marcus had learned empathy through service. Jennifer had discovered humility through helping others. David had been rewarded for his integrity. Sterling Aviation had prospered by embracing respect. But most importantly, 12 young women were now studying aviation because a scholarship fund existed, created from a moment when one simple woman refused to accept that jets were only for businessmen. Sometimes the most powerful response to prejudice isn't revenge, but the patient work of opening minds and creating opportunities for others to succeed.